Welcome to the Law School Toolbox Podcast. Today we are welcoming special guest Meg Keene, author and entrepreneur extraordinaire. I am incredibly excited for this episode, so I hope you enjoy it. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience, so you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the Catapult Conference. Alison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review and rating on iTunes. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started. Welcome back. Today we have a special guest on the podcast, Meg Keene. Although Meg is not a lawyer, but she's married to one, so we consider her part of the club. She is a kick-ass entrepreneur with a lot of very interesting things to say. She's the founder and editor-in-chief of A Practical Wedding, the top independently held wedding publication in the world, the author of 2 books, A Practical Wedding and A Practical Wedding Planner, and a new project called The Compact. I started reading Meg's website when I was planning my wedding 8 years ago, but the thoughtful writing that she and her team do on relationships, entrepreneurship, motherhood, and feminism is really where I think they rock the most. Even though I do love your wedding stuff too. But I think that she and her team are producing some of the best content out there on these topics. Alison and I have both been fans for quite some time, so we're thrilled to have her join me on the podcast today. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
So Meg, we talk a lot on this podcast about the path to entrepreneurship. Alison and I have chatted about the learning curve to running and building your own company. How did you learn what you needed to know to be successful?
I feel like I didn't. No, I had sort of a unusual path to entrepreneurship, I think. I went to school for theater at NYU. I was pretty clear from pretty early on that I wanted to work for myself. Going back, it's sort of like I'm not even sure, like putting it together, I'm like, I don't know. That's just where my head was at. Mm-hmm. I grew up if we trace it all the way back, I grew up at Renaissance fairs. So I grew up around a lot of like small business artisan sort of entrepreneurs. And I did have a feeling of like, I knew early on I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to have some flexibility. I think I thought I wanted to like work from home and have my kids at home, and then realized that was like
almost impossible.
100% like not what I wanted. I remember coming home and telling my now husband that, and he was like, yeah, I was just waiting for you to figure that out. So, but it does give me like the flexibility and ability to, like be the mom I want. But I started blogging back when it was sort of like setting up a Blogspot account. You didn't need any startup capital. You didn't really need any sort of business structures. I didn't have a like business checking account for 2 years. And I do think like recently we did a content audit. And so I just dug through what is now 9 years of content. And the internet being where it is now, it's a totally different place, right? Like, I don't know how many of you were reading the internet in great depth 9 years ago, but there just was not.
That's because we're not spring chickens anymore.
Yeah, there was just not the same volume of content. This is like pre-BuzzFeed. This is like pre-Twitter. No, Twitter was like in its infancy.
Yeah.
Pre like the Facebook feed kind of thing. So we were all sort of desperate for content. And there was no real like sense of professionalism. Anyway, doing this content audit, I went back through and was like, oh, I feel like I figured out what I was doing 2 years ago. So it is like an ever evolving process. And I think my personality is just one that I think far more comfortable than most just sort of throwing myself in the deep end. Mm-hmm. And just being like, whatever, I'll figure it out. And that's sort of what I did with my business.
Yeah, I think that willingness to just keep learning is just one of the main things to survive entrepreneurship. I think you have to have.
Yeah, and willingness to keep failing, if we're going to be
honest. Fair point. Let's talk about failure, because that is one of the major things.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I just, we just had our 9-year anniversary as a business in March. And I feel like I'm like fresh off a like really hard failing spree. This has been like January till now. And so it really just never stops. And you never stop being like, oh, that was like a total disaster. Absolutely the wrong thing to do. I don't know. It's easy to look around and be like, oh, these people know what they're doing. And when I do that, I feel like I'm often looking at male entrepreneurs, but I realize they also have, in general, sort of a lot of structural supports that we don't have.
Right.
The joke has always been that, like, if our company was run by a man, we would have funders like lining up around the block trying to get in on it, because we are now the largest privately owned wedding publication in, as far as we know, the world. Maybe there's a huge one in China, but we're bigger than the one in India. But you know, it's like, it's fine. We haven't gone and like actively gone for funding, but if you're male, it's sort of a different setup. So it's easy for me to look at men who are my age, who are running like, you know, companies with large amounts of funding, and feel like they know what they're doing more than I do. But look at Uber. Clearly they don't. So,
right, exactly. They're making plenty of mistakes.
Plenty of mistakes.
I think it is this idea for a lot of women entrepreneurs is that we're kind of creating something to solve a work or a life conundrum that we see. You know, I think for me, it was looking at the people down the road at the job that I had going like, well, if I don't want that life, what do I do next? You know, and then it's like, is anyone going to give me the life that I want? No, then I guess I have to come up and make it myself. And I used to call myself a reluctant entrepreneur, which is a terrible thing to say.
My coach would say, be careful with your words.
Right, exactly. Because I realized, like, when I first started talking to other, especially women, about entrepreneurship, I used that language. And then I actually did have a man at an event who was a professor at the college I went to come up to me, and he says, you cannot be a reluctant entrepreneur. You're just an entrepreneur. Like, own it. You made choices. This is what you're doing. And it was kind of this aha moment. I'm like, oh, you're right. I did make this choice, and I am building something. And then, you know, when I run payroll, and I'm like, wow, there are like people who are living off of the work that we're doing. Like, that's like a no joke business. All of a sudden, you feel like you're in something really legitimate.
Yeah. And I mean, I've never been a reluctant entrepreneur. So, I mean, in any capacity, this has always been what I've wanted, gone after it really hard. And I have made a decision to build it slowly and to build it sustainably, which is one of the reasons every time I look at funding, I'm like, oh, this last quarter, I had gotten a business line of credit for the first time, really for like no reason, but it ended up being good timing because we decided to move into office space, which is near my house, which is great. Which involves some renovating, which I was like, oh, how much could that cost?
More than you think.
Oh my God.
Is the answer.
Hired up, like the whole 9 yards. So I ended up going into that line of credit, but that's the first time I've even ever touched, you know, any sort of credit at all. Like I've always, and this is lucky that I entered this particular business at a point in time when this is doable, but I also just come from a background where we did not have a lot of money. And I grew up in an area where nobody had a lot of money, or I grew up in the second most impoverished city in the United States after Detroit. So that just sort of was the attitude I grew up around of like, I don't know, you just figure out how to make it work.
Right.
So the business has always, like, I've never put a dollar into it that the business didn't earn. And we did, like, I don't even think when we used credit actually, we never even went into the red. I just sort of like used it to make sure that there was always, you know, a padding there. So yeah, it's always been sort of like dollar in, dollar out.
Did you ever read is it Chris Guillebeau, his $100 Startup? Did you ever read that book?
I know his name, and I've read other stuff by him, but I haven't read that.
So that was one of the things. Oh
yeah, actually, I have read that. Yeah. Like, if you had $100, what would you do?
Yeah, well, and he profiles entrepreneurs who like basically they start things with like $100.
Right.
And when we were starting out, I think Alison gave me that book to read, and it was really powerful because I think I had this idea that you had to have all these resources to build something.
Yeah.
And, you know, we built it in kind of a same bootstrapping, like you grow as you can afford to grow type of way. We had we're able to, because of technology, to like have a platform to do it that way. But I just didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, I think because, I mean, I grew up really like well outside the upper middle class, in a way that like I have now with a husband who's a lawyer, I have to like learn how to navigate situations. I mean, my husband and I grew up together. We didn't date in high school or anything, but we were born in the same hospital, went to the same preschool kind of thing. So we grew up together, but his family was like one of the few sort of professional upper middle class families in town. My parents are both very well educated, but sort of only one person worked at a time, and there were like health crises and whatever. So money was always tight. But he had like a business owning mom and a public defender dad. So they were like, that was rich for where I came from. But because I came from this place where it's just like you just like put it together on what you have, that was really never a question for me. And I think maybe I had $2,000 in the bank when I started the business, but that was like not like $2,000 for spending.
That was like $2,000. That was
$2,000 of like absolute emergency money. So yeah, so I literally was not $100 business. It was a $0 business.
So other than like the fact that funders aren't often particularly interested in women,
right?
What do you think are the other challenges of being a woman entrepreneur?
I mean, the biggest challenge has always been the being taken seriously challenge. Yeah. And I'm also...
Even in this market where it's kind of a gendered
particularly in this market, really? I think. More because people don't... If I were a man and I had a large wedding business, people would be like, oh my God, you must be a brilliant entrepreneur. That's like a multi-billion-dollar industry, blah, 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 blah. But for many, many years... everyone sort of treated me like, oh, you must have never gotten over your wedding.
Interesting.
Like, oh, you have this hobby. And also because I have a husband who's an attorney, for many, many years, I was treated as like, oh, it's so nice that your husband has this like job and he can support your hobby, which was infuriating because I helped put my husband through law school. I had quit and was working on my own when he graduated, and he graduated in the worst of the recession, and he was trained in public interest, like he was going to be a public defender, and everything was frozen. There were no jobs, right? And so he graduated from Berkeley, and it was like all of his friends that had trained in criminal law were just unemployed. They were like top of their class and unemployed. So there was a whole year where he was like working at the San Francisco Public Defender's Office on a fellowship. He was, taking one bar and then another bar because I was like, well, you passed that bar, you don't have a job. So I made him take the New York bar too. So he's taken the California and the New York bar. Poor thing. It's like two of the hardest bars in the country. And then I was like, well, we might want to live in Louisiana. Maybe you should or in New Orleans, maybe you should take the Louisiana bar. And he was like, look, I'm drawing the line. Like, it's not even the same.
It's not like a hobby.
Well, also, like, totally Louisiana law is like totally different law. He was like, no, I'm not even qualified. So I then supported us for that year until he got a job. And I've always out-earned him, partially just because my career was a little bit more established. So yeah, it's never been like I have a hobby job situation. In fact, we were so used to, for a while, for not having his income because he'd been in law school and then hadn't been employed, that we like treated his income like bonus money. Like we were like, oh, I'll just put it in the bank. Like we lived off my income kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, it has only been, so I've been in business 9 years, and I would say in the past 2 years, people have started treating me like I have a real job.
That's really amazing.
Yeah.
We got some interesting questions when I got pregnant as business partners. We had some people ask us, like one, they asked if I told Alison or I'd been hiding it from her, which was always one of my favorite things. Weird. And I'm like, she's my business partner. Like, I told her right away. She was in the top bundle of people that I told, and we've done strategic planning knowing that I was trying to get pregnant.
We were not, I feel like we did not have it together enough to have done strategic planning. But now we're professionals at maternity leave. There's always somebody on maternity leave here. I only employ basically women in their 30s. A lot of them are newly married. They're not all of them. Some of them are not married at all. So 2 years ago, when you count freelancers and our lawyers and our interns and whatever, 2 years ago, the company had 8 babies.
That's amazing.
I don't know if amazing is the word that you're looking for.
Amazing has a lot of different connotations. Amazing that you all survived having 8 babies together.
It's my 2 maternity leaves that have been like brutal.
Yeah.
And now my like second in command is on maternity leave. But at this point, it's like, well, and then we are planning for like her second in command is like going to try for a baby next. I mean, people don't always tell us, but she has told us. And then we assume Maddie will want a second. I think I'm done. But I literally am like, okay, well, this is the lineup. Like, we just function with the idea that, like, someone is always going to be out on leave.
Yeah, and, it was interesting. It started even before I got pregnant. Alison cut her finger and, like, couldn't type. She had to have, like, crazy finger surgery.
Right.
And it was like that finger surgery was one of the best things that happened to our business because it forced us to realize that, like, we couldn't do everything on our own. And then when I got pregnant, we were like, oh, well, now Lee's gonna be, and have a limited capacity.
Right.
We need to find other people. And so when you look at our company's growth, it's these like things that happened that most people would say, well, that was the downturn.
Yeah.
Actually the opportunities for growth.
We have always grown enormously every time someone's gone on a maternity leave, because for me to go on leave and then, again, for Maddie to go on leave, we have to hire someone to replace, to fill in. And then usually by the time someone comes back from leave, I mean, Maddie's hire, we did not hire on like a, temporary basis, but usually what happens is we have to hire someone and train them to take over. And California, we're blessed. We have like FMLA and disability and whatever. So I give everyone the same leave that I have, which is 6 weeks disability before, and then 6 weeks FMLA and 6 weeks. So, it's like 3-4, I can't do math, 4 months maybe. But usually by the time you get back, the person that is there is essentially earning their own salary.
Right.
So it's easy to keep them on. Yeah. And then they go on to obviously out earn their own salary. Right. So we definitely grow each time someone goes on leave.
So see, getting pregnant is really a good thing for business.
Yeah. It actually, in my case, 100%. 100% has been, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm tired, but that's actually, I'm less tired now because my kids are sleeping through the night. So.
Yeah. We've had a really good run with sleeping right now, so we're pretty rested in my house too. Well, one of the things that I always find interesting about your sites is that you have made conscious decisions. Let me say that again. You've made conscious business decisions to have kind of a social mission as part of your work. So I noticed many years ago when you were setting up vendors and sponsorships that all of your advertisers sign a sanity pledge. I think you still have that as part of your website. And part of that sanity pledge is about being welcoming to LGBTQ.
Yeah, which was the issue at the time. I mean, now we really have been like sort of like rode that whole marriage equality wave because we started in 2008 and nobody was even publishing same-sex wedding, so it's just like it obviously happened very fast. But yeah, so we were really sort of on the edge there, on the front edge of that for a long time. And then, and that was obviously very directly related to our business and what we do. And it's something that was super important to me. And we spent a lot of time like educating and like winning hearts and minds and it just being like, all right, person by person, commenter by commenter. And we really found that we have this like great entry point with people, both for feminism and for, and now feminism's more of a buzzword. So like both of those things have moved a lot in the past 9 years. But we have this great entry point for people where it's like this moment of joy and you're looking at people's happy pictures and whatever. And you're able to move the needle with people in a way that like you certainly could never on Facebook. Right. It's like, is anyone's opinion ever been changed on Facebook? So in the current political climate, it was just like an obvious decision because it's what we've always done to like keep our, social and political like focus. Right.
I think it should be no talk to you. I think it's still important. I was actually at dinner with a gay friend who recently got engaged last night. And I was telling him that this is what I was doing today. I was telling him about your website. And then I got to say, and all their vendors are LGBTQ friendly. That's like part of their platform. And he, and he was like, really? And I'm like, yeah, So
yeah, we're prepping for Pride Week. We've always done Pride Week and then we didn't do it for a year or two, because it was like right after, I mean, this year again, it feels important, but it was like right after gay marriage was legalized. It somehow like, it just was falling flat. Like everyone was like, oh, we're there already. And apparently we're not there already.
We're not there. There's plenty of good work to be done.
So that is what I was doing right before this podcast, was like prepping our Pride Week that we decided to do 2 weeks before Pride. So we're like, all right, let's pull this all together.
Yeah. And I think that is interesting what you said about the kind of the wedding market being an entry point to be able to have these bigger discussions, because you, especially in light of the recent elections and things like that, have been doing a lot of writing about social issues, political issues, women's issues, you name it, which, you know, I think really resonates with us. But how do you decide to incorporate that into your business? Because, I mean, with the size readership you have, not everybody's going to agree with you.
No, not everyone's going to agree with you, though. I mean, at least for our business, and I suspect for a lot of businesses, we sort of have two audiences. We have like our really core audience, and then you have like the more drive-by audience. And the more drive-by audience is coming to you for like resources, and they're not that invested. But yeah, I mean, I think part of building a brand is deciding who you want sort of on your team, and also who you don't want on your team. Like, I think that there's been a lot of writing about sort of building a brand around this, but I think that that is really critical, and frankly is like applies across the spectrum. Like it applies in terms of like law firms, for example, as well, right? Like I was just reading the like debacle about Trump's private lawyer in the New York Times this morning.
Oh, I haven't read that yet.
It's real fun.
Okay.
But so, you know, he's Bill O'Reilly's lawyer.
Oh.
Right. And so already you're like, well, we're sliding down now. But he's also, his firm represents the largest state bank. I can't get through it. The largest state bank of Russia.
Oh.
And represents an oligarch who's like a close personal friend of Vladimir Putin, right? So like,
do you think he'll want to be on our podcast? I feel like maybe not.
But like that's building your brand, right? It's like that is true. Like law firms, like who they are working with and who they're not working with, whatever. So I think that's really important, that we can't, particularly in the moment. And we have a lot of, you know, in the current environment, like we just have a lot of skin in the game. Like we've made a real very conscious push to like really diversify our team, which we've made a couple new hires, in the past few weeks, actually, which further diversifies our team, which is great. But, you know, our family's Jewish, and, you know, we have gay staffers, and we have staffers of color and whatever. And we have, you know, one of our staffers is Iranian. Like, it's all very, very personal. So there's I think it is such a privilege to be able to pretend that things are separate. Yeah. And to be like, well, my politics are separate. Like, okay, maybe that's true if you're like a straight white man, right? And you have like the world at your feet. Yeah. But like for the rest of us, it's not separate. Like I'm a little less freaked out now, but like, you know, I had really like terrifying fears for my Jewish kids at the beginning of this administration, right? Yeah. There were like neo-Nazis in the White House, like, oh my God. So that is not really something that I can like separate out and then just pretend like, oh, this is this other little thing I do. So, I mean, that said, we have also done some recalibration recently, like now that we're a little further past the election, like, okay, where do our brand limits lie? Like, what are we going to talk about? What are we not going to talk about? How do we keep focused on like the brand, but keep our politics in it? So it's, you know, it's a balancing act. It is. I think it was interesting. The first time we really felt pushed to talk about politics, I mean, we're two Bay Area lawyers. I mean, it's not that shocking what our politics are. Was right after the election. Alison and I were both devastated. We were on a Skype phone call, like in tears, you know, trying to discuss how this happened. And then we sent out an email blast to both of our brands, just basically saying, like, here's where we are, like, we're regrouping. And, you know, we wrote about like wanting to be the helpers. And, you know, we really we wanted to kind of include something in our business model from our perspective that was like, we see some of the problems, like how do we move this forward? Like how do we help new lawyers
navigate so that we can get the new lawyers that can fix some of these things that we're happy with, out of law school and in as successful as possible. And, we got some incredible responses, like these emails that were just like, we're also women in tears. Like it was mostly women, but it was really, it was really touching. And then we got a few that weren't so nice.
And whatever. They can move along.
Right. And so, but it was interesting because that was the first time I was kind of like, oh, are we okay with that? But it was the same thing. Like we couldn't pretend like this hadn't happened.
Yeah. And I gave a keynote in January, and it was like sort of it was the end of the week that Trump got elected. Okay. And that the travel ban had just gone into play. I mean, I get chills thinking about it. So I was there with my daughter, who was 1.5 at the time. I had a staffer whose passport says she's from Iran. Mm-hmm. She's an American citizen. It was so bad that all of us traveled with passports because we were like, we don't know. This is moving so fast.
Right, what's going to happen? Are
we going to have to leave the country, basically? Right. And I was away from, my husband and my son. And so we had our passports. It sounds like crazy, but also it was that was just a week where it was you don't know what is happening. No. And she suddenly, couldn't get family members in and out of the country. It was terrible. So I gave a keynote at this design conference, and nothing had really been said, even though the organizers' politics are pretty, obvious. And I just was like, look, you can't, these people don't, we are now in a moment so extreme that if these people are voting for people that wish ill towards you or your children, who are you benefiting by not saying anything?
No, it's true.
So, plus, whatever, the lawyers and judges are saving us right now. It's really, really important.
Yeah, and actually, it was the travel ban was the first. We did an interview. We'll link to it in the show notes, where we interviewed lawyers who were at the airport when the first travel ban happened, and that was such a special podcast for us because Alison and I separately did these interviews, and then we kind of put. It was
so important.
Yeah, we put the episode together, and it gave me chills, and it was. Guys out there who are law students, we love you too. We need those male lawyers too, but they were women lawyers who were at those airports.
We we went and we took our kids, and we, had also had these conversations about how my husband's family is Jewish. They came to the States right before the travel ban in the late 20s. Mm-hmm. So literally the only reason that my husband exists or my kids exist is because they were able to come in before everyone, they knew was killed.
Right.
So anyway, but I was like, do you need to be there as a lawyer? And he was like, yeah, I need to not be there. That is not the kind of law I do. I need to not be. And even one of my good girlfriends is an immigration lawyer. And I was like, do you need to go? And she was like, no. That's not the kind of immigration law I do. There are people who this is what they do. Yeah. And the best I could do was bring them snacks.
Right, exactly. And I did have lawyer friends who went and were delivering the snacks.
Exactly.
And writing down names of people because it is, I didn't have that, background either. And I thought, do I go? And then I'm like, I am cluttering the space.
Exactly. That's what my husband said. He was like, no.
But I can interview people and highlight the people who are there. But that is how I contribute. Well, I think it's going to be interesting. I think as we move forward, how. I think a lot of businesses are becoming more politically minded a little bit because it's so hard to ignore. It's so
I think it was West Elm that I was on Instagram a couple weeks ago or a month ago. I don't know. And they had a post and I was like, this is what corporate leadership looks like. Yeah. It's really happening. I mean, and there's also examples of this is what corporate failure looks like. Right. Again, Uber. Yeah. But I mean, I do this. This has always been part of our business, but put you vote with your dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really true. Well, then let's move to kind of authenticity, this idea of authenticity, because I think one of the things that I've always appreciated about your brands since I started reading them, and when I started reading them, I think you had a Practical Wedding, you had Reclaiming Wife.
Yeah, which was never really its own site, but but it was a portion. Offshoot. Yeah, it's still there. It's just rolled in.
Yeah. And you have talked a lot about what happens in your own personal life, your own struggles. Your team is very honest about things that they've gone through. You even recently, I think during Mental Health Awareness Month, you were talking
accidentally, but yeah.
Okay. Well, you did it more than once. So after a while, it wasn't that accidental.
Yeah, because someone was like, oh, hey, do you know it's Mental Health Awareness Month? And I was like, I did not.
But how do you kind of decide to share this public persona, you know, and to be authentic about who you are? Because this is a very personal brand. You are kind of the face of this brand.
I mean, I don't know. It's not, at first, there are things that I don't share, and it sort of rotates what that is. And I actually think of myself as reasonably private in some ways. Certainly for someone who's online, like there's more that I keep private. Like I've loosened up a little bit lately, but like I don't post my kids' full face on the internet. I don't use their names. And that for me is also like I can make my own choices, but I want to be somewhat careful about what choices I'm making for them. And also I get recognized on the street. I don't necessarily, and I have walked in, you know, it's the Bay Area. I have walked into like daycare at the Y and been like, oh, I know who that kid is. Their mom must be here because of Instagram, and don't necessarily want my kids in that position.
Yeah.
But I don't know. My background is theater. So I always, I think, sort of had some sort of expectation of public life. And if something, I don't tend to share something if I'm like in the middle of it, going through it in a way I feel like I haven't processed. Because like, don't share something on the internet that you don't want people's like thoughts and opinions on.
That's very good advice.
So
everyone should write that down.
Yeah, for real.
For real.
So I mean, literally, like, don't share your bathroom if you something.
It's so true.
So I was like very, very depressed during my first pregnancy, like dangerously depressed. And I did not talk a lot about it because I was, you know, like it was like unclear if I was going to be 51-50 at some points. Like I was not in an emotionally safe space, and I did not feel like, oh, the support of the internet will lift me up right now.
Right.
But on a lot of things, you know, I talk about like, we alluded to this, but, you know, I just went off like an anti-anxiety medication and had like horrible withdrawals. And I talked about it on Instagram, which I generally find to be a very supportive platform anyway. I mean, it's public, but to me, that's not like, I don't have any like shame or stigma issues around it. Like if you asked me if I was on anti-anxiety pills, I'd be like, yes, yeah, no, yeah. So I think everyone has to know what they're personally comfortable with. And people say a lot of things to me like, well, the internet is forever. And like, yeah, sort of. Right. I mean, but also it's like really not forever.
It's kind of in passing as well.
It's kind of in passing, right? So like the worst, I got trashed on the internet. I was blessedly trashed on Twitter for like 3 days running. When I announced my pregnancy, it was great timing because I was like, you know, suicidally depressed, but it's fine. But Twitter is like the most passing. Like, good luck finding any of that now.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I have a hate forum that's, I think, a little bit bored right now. But I've had a hate forum for years, so I am, and I've had various moments of like being more and less emotional about that. But partially, I have a really great business coach who I've been working with the past few years. And I have really gotten to a point of being like, that's other people's issue. It's not my issue, and it's not my business. And my business is to like be an adult and deal with my own stuff. So, yeah, it's like, it is easy for me to share from an authentic place. And I'm a business owner. Other than that, I mostly consider myself to be a writer.
Yeah.
Even though the books I've written are not like great works of personal essayness, but it's hard to get paid for that. So maybe one day. But I'm also like a how-to writer, right? Like, I can give me your boring subject. I can make it interesting. But I'm a personal essay writer as well. And so sharing within the form of like personal essay or even within Instagram, you know, I'm trained as an artist. And so it's just like, if I have a form, I'm not just sharing like willy-nilly, right? So I'm writing a personal essay, and you never will see a personal essay that hasn't gone through like 3 editors and a, you know, copy edit and whatever. So it's not just like, blah.
Right.
And Instagram is sort of the same way for me, where I do a lot of sharing now, where it's like, it is a very specific, like, I'm taking a picture in a specific like image crop, and I'm editing it in a certain way, and then I'm putting like a certain kind of text. So there's like a form to sort of hold all of that, and that makes it easier for me.
And I think what you're saying even about kind of your writing and your Instagram and things like that, a lot of people, when they think about running their own business or they think about a social media presence or they think about building a brand, I think they just think that you take lots of cute pictures and like throw them on Instagram. But I have to say, like, our social media presence is nowhere near your team. And every time I see your guys' feeds go by, I'm always like, my God, how much prep has gone into that? Because it's so solid and consistent.
Right.
And I really respect that. Now, before I was running my own social media,
it's supposed to look easy.
It's supposed to look easy. But I think a lot of people don't realize that you're really, to make it look easy, it's really hard. It takes a lot of work. Like you said, copy it, for the written word, it takes a lot of work. Right. Even our blogs, like nothing gets like thrown up by just like getting like read by one person. I have a
team of 6 people. So, social media, it sort of depends what you're talking about. My personal feed is just like me throwing stuff up.
Right.
But it is also me throwing stuff up with like an entire skill set of like editing suite of tools on my phone, right? Like other moms will send me pictures and I'm like, oh God, like would it be rude for me to edit this and send it back?
That's amazing.
It's horrible.
Can I start sending you my kids' pictures?
Can you
edit them and send them back?
Because I like will edit it on my phone because I'm like, this like great first start. Like when I edit it and then I'm like, it looks 1,000 times better. Should I send it back?
All right, if our kids ever hang out and we swap pictures, send it back. Just send it back.
But I don't actually for the compact, I do run our social feeds, so it's been a rough 2 weeks, so there's nothing on them right now. But I don't touch any of the other feeds. There's too much. Like I am the boss. I can't do that at this point. But I have like staffers that's their job. So the amount of prep, like you guys, we're not just throwing stuff on Instagram. Like we have like a whole program where everything's programmed out and we like look at it in preview and we like make sure the color story makes sense. And we have like an entire team of people like sourcing images, like, and when, any like shoot that we've taken, there's like hours of work that's gone into it. So none of it is like on the fly at all. And that's just like if running a business, right?
If you want to run a brand, again, like you can outsource that stuff to a point, but when you're building something, you have to be willing to do that. You have to be willing to learn it all.
Yep.
Yep.
Our posts don't. We do 2 posts a day. At one point, where I wanted to die, we did 3 posts a day. Maddie like sprung that on me when I was in maternity leave. My first maternity leave. She's like, now we're doing 3 posts a day. And it literally was just like I never was done. I just like nothing else got done in the business. I just felt like I was in this hamster wheel of content. And it came up in the comments recently and people were like really complaining about it. And they were just like, I don't understand. Like, why can't we get 3 posts a day? I mean, first of all, it's free, so you get what you get.
Right.
But also I was like, I know that it looks like we just could throw up an extra thing every day. But I would say the average of a post that goes up, I would say between 4 and 6 hours of work goes into each post. Because it goes, it's written and then it goes through like, we have a whole process. Like it goes through prep and then it goes through the editing filter, like the editing layer. And then it goes through the like final prep and then it goes through QC and then it goes through copy editing and then QC, which is our quality control. Like there's like 5 different color like markings on our co-schedule calendar. Getting something out the door. So I mean, it's just like, and this is, I will say, like being married to a lawyer, like the difference is people automatically think his work and is important. And but like anything involves the same number of like systems and tools and skills and whatever.
If you're going to do anything with excellence, excellence is hard work.
Right. He's just writing a memo and I'm like shopping for black wedding dresses. It's fine.
It's totally fine. Totally legitimate. How do you juggle kind of like business tasks and keeping the business running tasks? This is always something Alison and I talk about a lot. We talk about like scheduling deep work. I know we've tried all these different
It is so hard.
things.
So the team has sort of come up with a phrase, which is $1,000 an hour work, which is that I'm supposed to be doing $1,000 an hour work. I'm supposed to be doing like the thinking, the big thoughts kind of thing. It varies, and it varies. You know, we had to let some people go on our team recently, so I'm a little bit more in the weeds than I was. But it's fine because there's other things I'm not dealing with, you know.
Right.
So, but we do try to be very aware of the fact that my job at this point, which has changed so much over 9 years,
Right.
but my job is to be CEO, right?
Yeah.
And I will have employees come to me and be like, I need you to not do this because you have to be the CEO.
Yeah.
So, you know, I still write, and I mean, this last quarter and a half was so rough that I wasn't writing, and I think the brand suffered, but I was just trying to bail us out. And that has to happen sometimes. But, you know, I do write. I am the final call on all things editorial, but I also have to carve out time for, like, I have to do the books. I have to make the big hiring and firing decisions.
Right.
I have never found that my job works well on a schedule.
Yeah.
It really
No,
is
that's
just
fine.
like I have a paper checklist in front of me of like stuff I'm trying to get through, but it's really just like what has come up, what
Right.
needs to
What's
be dealt
the
with.
inbox?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's the inbox? Which is fine because I work well that way.
Yeah.
And people in other parts of my team, that is not how they work, right? Like they have like a very specific, on Monday I do this, on Tuesday I do this,
Yeah.
whatever. And they're just different jobs.
I know, I've tried that. I was like,
It doesn't
I was gonna do like these admin tasks on Monday, and then it like works for a week, and then it's all out the window.
Right, exactly. Something happens.
Something happens.
Yeah.
I also have a paper checklist on my desk.
Exactly.
Because no matter what I try, and we have tried them all, it always comes back to the paper.
It's fine, and I work better that way. I don't want to know what I'm. I mean, which sounds crazy, but I don't want to know what I'm doing when I get into the office. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I generally have a general sense, like, okay, today I need to work on the books, and I need to do like some employee stuff and some editorial stuff. But like that is really it. And then for this morning, for example, I thought I was going to do the books, but I did not do the books. I've done some like offer letters, and I've done some, you know, moving around content and editing, and that's fine. It keeps me entertained. And a lot of people want to just know what they're doing every day.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. I think that openness to the uncertainty and that willingness to pivot constantly, if you're not comfortable in that environment, then you shouldn't be running your own shop.
Yeah. If you don't like uncertainty.
Yeah.
Like if uncertainty and also so much of my job is strategy and strategizing, right?
Yeah.
So it's like I like writing a lot. I live and breathe on like strategy and like making a budget go and whatever. And that's really critical. I mean, there's a rule in my family that my husband cannot start his own firm. Like it comes up, he has friends that have started it, and I'm like, you would be like, you are a great lawyer and you love being a lawyer. You would be garbage at running a company.
Different skill set.
And then I would have to run it, and I have a company. Right. And I don't want to run a law firm ever, so you cannot do that.
Yeah. It's different skill sets. Yeah. For sure.
You can be a partner at someone else's firm. Right. That's fine.
That's like a managing director.
Exactly. God forbid they make you the managing director. Right. Like, I would have to go speak to them and be like, are you trying to fail?
So funny.
Like, please, God, just let him write and go to court.
Yeah.
So,
well, I could talk to you all day. But before we have to wind up, I did want to talk to you about this role that you have as, you know, living with a lawyer.
I do.
Yeah. And
I have lived with a lawyer for a long time.
And you knew him when he decided to go to law school. You've been through the law school journey.
I knew him before he decided to go to law school.
You encouraged him to take more than 2 bars, even though
I did. We were, little known fact, we co-led our mock trial team together in high school.
Wow.
And his dad was our coach. So I was the lead prosecutor and he was the lead defense attorney.
Who won?
I mean, I was better.
Okay.
I think I did. Well, we both got a lot of awards, but I did have an undefeated season, and his the only reason we did not go to state is because he tied one.
Oops.
So I don't know.
Now that you're like still holding on to that in a little part.
Yeah. So we've been doing law together for a long time.
Yeah. So we actually write a lot about what it's like to be in relationships with lawyers and law students and people taking the bar, because it's hard. At times, you know, because it can be all consuming.
Yep.
So do you have tips as someone who's lived in that role, either for people who are looking at how to support their significant others?
I mean, it's interesting. So one, David went back to law school a little later. He was 26 and I was 27.
Yeah.
Which we thought was normal, but a lot of people go straight through.
Yeah.
I will say he loves the law, and a lot of people who went straight through have since dropped
true.
out.
Yes.
Because he had a whole other career and then was like, no, I don't want this. I want to go to law school.
Yeah.
So he really just approached it like a job because he'd had a job, right? So he was just like up in the morning, kept really regular hours. I was working in an investment bank and I worked 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So I actually had a much
that's a really great work-life balance there.
Oh my God. It was awful. And then I was running the site and building the business on the side.
Yeah.
And I would have to do like 2 28-hour shifts per week during earnings, which was 2 weeks every quarter, right? So I'd have like 4 28-hour shifts per quarter. So I'm somehow managed to make law school look like
yeah, you did. You were like,
so how did I
reading cases, whatever.
I know. Yeah, I would be like, oh, I see you're on the couch doing some homework. It seems rough for you. I was up before dawn, getting on the bus to support us both.
Right.
So I didn't do a lot of supporting him. Frankly, I was in a really bad situation. And he was just really organized and didn't need like a ton of support.
Yeah.
I made him take 2 bars. Yeah, I feel like my role has been like, it's not that tough.
Yeah.
Get over it.
Yeah.
Which is maybe like,
well, I think there's something to be said for that. I mean,
right? I'm like, you're a lawyer. Like you're reading some cases. It's fine. He also, I will say that my role over the years has been hopefully guiding him into decisions that I think have been better for him and for our family. Mm-hmm. When he was deciding, he was like, should I get my PhD in history or should I be a lawyer? And I was like, well, I'll leave you if you, if you get your PhD in history.
Pressure.
No, I was like, I don't want to live in Iowa.
Right.
And I don't want you to like struggle to find work. Like it sounds great, but like please do the thing that ends in a job.
Right.
And his dad was a lawyer, so he had a really good sort of sense of what it would look like. Mm-hmm. I also really guided him away from corporate law, and all of our friends that have gone into corporate law are miserable, and many of them have left.
Yeah.
So, and now he's at like a mid-sized law firm, and he does education law. I helped sort of encourage him, and again, this has been like encouraging his own instincts.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of what happens in law is people either go into it for the wrong reasons or get pushed in directions for the wrong reasons. There's a lot of like, oh, you'll make better money here. It'll be more secure here, whatever. His interest was always really being a litigator. He is a litigator. I think it is not unrelated that he's one of the only lawyers that we know that like loves his job and that he's a litigator, right? Yeah. So he goes to court a lot. Like he's like a TV lawyer. Like, and I am sort of continuing to push him as our kids get older, as I potentially sell the business, or like part of my business. I'm continuing to push him to like look at going back into criminal law because he's like the happiest probably when he's a defense attorney.
Yeah.
So I think that is really, I do make him get over himself because I'm like, it's not really that bad.
Yeah.
The corporate law kind of is that bad. I mean, I had the equivalent of a corporate law job when I was at the investment bank. But I have just really pushed him towards things that I think will make him happy as opposed to will make him the most money. We're currently in the like year-long fight over whether he should go to 90% time, which is something that his firm offers. You get paid 80% for 90% time.
Okay.
But it's something that pretty much all of the moms with young children are doing.
Yeah.
And most of the other associates at his level are women in his firm. But he's like, well, I can't do it. It's bad for my career. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's like the patriarchy talking. We've also had conversations about like his definition of success and how it involves like working a lot of hours, et cetera, et cetera. And how the women that we know that are lawyers that he considers successful are not doing that. So I've pushed him on that. But yeah, I just think pushing people to where they're actually going to be happy, because the thing that we've seen the most in our friends' law careers is like burnout, working too many hours, doing a kind of law that like, you're like, anyone would be miserable doing doc review for like 1,000. Like, we're watching Better Call Saul, and I don't know if you guys watch it. Oh my God, the female lawyer who's like single-handedly being the lawyer for a bank. And I used to cover banks at the investment bank. So she's looking at like loan ratios and like working like 14 hours a day.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just like, of course you don't like your job.
Oh my gosh,
like nobody would like your job.
I remember
it's good money, but why?
My hours and hours and hours of doc review. Yeah.
So, you know, he just doesn't do doc review. Like,
Right.
that's not a thing he does. He writes and he goes to court. So I do think that one of the best things that your partner can do is, one, make you get over yourself like you're not a coal miner.
Yep.
And two, really make you ask questions about what's going to make you happy and what you like about the law. When he started law school, I gave him a copy, which we have still, obviously, of To Kill a Mockingbird, and like wrote in it, like, I hope you always remember what is important to you about the law. And I have been the one who's sort of continued to like remind him.
Yeah.
And I think that has helped him build a career that he actually
I think it's a really good point that loved ones, whether they're significant others or other loved ones, can be that reflection for you, because you can get into the weeds. You can like lose perspective because you're in this environment where everyone's freaking out or is super stressed, or like you do get offered this job that doesn't match your priorities, but the money is great and everybody's telling you to take it. Here's
the thing. I have worked those jobs. You can make $200,000 a year, but if you do not have time to live, there is literally no point.
Yeah.
I would never left the office, and it was just like, you could pay me $1 million a year and I literally am not living.
Yeah.
So like, why?
Yeah.
And I will also say splitting the workload has been important for us. So we know a lot of lawyer families with kids about our age. And in many cases, we work the same amount of hours that they do. We make the same amount of money that they do, if not a little bit more. And the difference is we have 2 jobs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I work like 40-ish hours a week. He works like 40 to 50 hours a week.
Right.
Combined, we make the same amount of money and then are able to cover daycare.
Right.
In their lawyer family, one person stays home, one person has a corporate law job.
Yeah.
They work 80 hours a week and they bring in like the accumulated amount of money. One of those scenarios is more miserable than the other.
That's true.
And also one has more job security. Like
That's
that
true.
One person gets laid off if you have another person with a job.
That's
so
true.
yeah, like splitting it. And not letting your male partner get really sucked in. I still think, I mean, you would know better than I do, but I feel like there's still this very like male idea of like what it is to be a successful lawyer.
Oh, for sure.
And a lot of women are like not doing that, which is sometimes why they're not partners at firms, though his firm has a lot of women and people of color in partnership roles, which is great. But like, he still is like, no, I have to work like 60 hours a week or I'm not successful. I haven't made a name for myself. And I am like constantly like questioning that, because I'm like, right, but that's, you have 2 small kids. You have 2 kids. Like they'll be older. Like, do you want to spend that extra 20 hours a week like locked in your study on the weekends, or do you want to spend it with your children? Like, you need to make some choices.
Yeah, life choices. I love the thing you said about To Kill a Mockingbird. And sometimes we even tell our students, just as they're starting out fresh-faced and excited about law school, to write letters to themselves.
Yeah.
About why they're there, like what they want to do with their lives, like what made them make this decision. And go back and read those letters when it's like final exam time and you don't want to do it, or you're studying for the bar.
And hot tip to those of you that are like fresh-faced or thinking about law school, if the reason you want to go to law school is your parents really think you should and the money is good.
That's a terrible...
Stop.
Yeah,
like,
stop.
We know people that are like, I really wanted to be a teacher. And you're like, oh my God. And then they're like, and now I'm $120,000 in debt and I don't have an option. Like, it's not. If you're not going to law school because you love the law, like, you should probably do something else.
100% agree. All right. Well, with that, we will be out of time, unfortunately. So I want to thank Meg for taking time out of her busy schedule to chat with us and inviting me to visit her new office space, which is pretty sweet. And the sun is shining. It's like gorgeous.
Yeah.
If you'd like to learn more about Meg and her projects, we have linked to her websites in the show notes. And you have your new The Compact project.
The Compact is coming up. It's going to be more lifestyle, but a lot of law students are getting engaged and getting married, let's be honest.
That's true. So you have various entry points.
You have various entry points. So you got a practicalwedding.com, and the compact.com is coming soon.
So, excellent. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox Podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on iTunes. We really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Our episodes are typically released on Monday. If you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.